still can't quite figure out how to get that transition without all of us awkwardly staring at the screen while it goes from the countdown to the thing. But hey, welcome to Crack Movie Club, the show where we do a book club, but for movies that feel like books but better. I am your host, Jordan Breeding, and I'm joined by my co-host, only one, Jesse.
Just me. I'm pulling double duty.
Yeah, because
I'll talk about musicals today.
Yes, excellent. Allie has flaked once again, so we are joined by our guest, Cracked senior editor, Logan Trent. What's up, Logan?
Hey, what's up?
Nothing much.
Air horns in the chat.
Air horns. So Logan. Oh, actually, let me do a little housekeeping. So we do a thing at the end where we got a banner for housekeeping. We do a thing at the end where if anybody has any questions or alternate observations or whatever, if they're interesting enough, we'll discuss them at the end, as well as if you have a different title, like an alternate title instead of Nightcrawler, which is what we watched this week. We will discuss whether those are worthwhile as well. So, all that said, I'm going to recap this movie. We watched 2014's Nightcrawler with Jake Gyllenhaal being a creepy little weirdo, hence the title. And all right, so as Logan put it before we went on air, it's basically the story of a young, down on his luck, plucky, soon-to-be journalist who works his way up through the ranks, gets a girlfriend, makes some friends, solves some crimes, really, and just overall, learns how to make it in America. He really achieves the American dream. But of course, he's also a creepy little weirdo, and he
puts the change he wants to see in the world out there.
He does. He gets a cool car.
Way. Yeah,
he gets a cool car, nice camera.
He sees a watch on, I guess it's a cop, and he says, "Well, gonna have."
It's clearly a personal security guard thing because he points out, I tried that job earlier, and then just
yeah, it's true.
And they wouldn't hire
the hell
me.
Out of him.
Yeah. So if you haven't seen it, watch it and come back because we're gonna spoil some stuff. Speaking of Logan, why did we watch this of all the movies in the world? Why this movie?
This movie is a great movie, but it's in that weird genre of film that has somehow become dated almost within like a year of its release. Like you see this with a lot of films where it just pops out and it's kind of zeitgeisty and it's like, oh yeah, this really has a real connection to this certain era period. And then it just kind of gets, the shelf life is very short there. This movie usually is kind of protected from that because it's a neo-noir type film and it's really more about just the industry and stuff. But for some reason, just because of the way that we kind of change with like media stuff, it actually falls into that other category in a way that I don't think anybody making it thought it would, like with like, say, Social Network or other movies where it's very connected to a zeitgeist thing. So it's kind of interesting to look at it back from there because I think Jordan, you said you also had seen this like when it came out, and Jesse, I think this is your first time, so I'm kind of interested in getting your views on the dated aspects right now. So
yeah. I think it's worth discussing when you say it's dated. So just to clarify on that recap, the premise is actually Jake Gyllenhaal is a stringer, or he becomes a stringer, which is to say he's basically an ambulance chaser, but instead of a lawyer, he's the guy with the camera, and so he. Every time he hears like somebody's crashed, he'll run up with a camera and try and film it and then sell that to a bunch of news stations for their morning news because they find if it bleeds, it leads. And so he quickly ascends and makes a lot of money because he has no scruples. He has no morals. He'll like see a body laying in the street and he'll get there before the cops and he'll move it so that there's better lighting. And he'll film it. And so he'll get these really rad shots of dead bodies and stuff like that. And ultimately it culminates in him encountering an active crime scene, sneaking into the house, filming dead bodies, all this stuff, and then withholding information about who the killers are so that he could stage that shootout essentially by calling it in at an opportune time and getting all that footage. So he's not a good dude.
That's to go back to the watch thing. Like that's one of the things that I like. And I think, and they said it was purposefully done. They establish him In the beginning, before he does any of this, you see him stealing copper and a fence and manhole covers so they could sell them to construction places. And
Right.
he just beats the holy hell out of a security guard that confronts him just to steal his watch. And it's a really good set point because it establishes that, like, oh, this isn't a man who's like losing himself while he's getting rich in the darkness. Is like, oh no, he's always been kind of a shady and scrupulous person. He's just kind of a piece of shit. So
Right.
I kind of like that they don't try to do that, like, oh, the game changed him type of perspective with this. It's just, no, he's just a monster. Like,
Yeah. Right.
yeah.
So, all right, but we're talking about dated.
Mhm.
You know, originally the idea that I think was really good is yeah, this whole idea, this symbiotic relationship is what the director keeps saying between sensationalist media and consumers, and the more that we heighten it, the more we consume it, and it just creates this rage monster. And I think those things are still relatively
I was going to say
true.
in 2015, those things stopped happening. The echo,
Right.
the echo chamber was pierced, and everybody got good, accurate information starting the next year.
Yeah, so I'm just really curious, Logan, when you say it's dated, even before we get to what Jesse's going to say, I'm just curious what you think feels dated, like specifically, because some of it feels
His
still
job in general.
okay.
If he's doing private journalism like that, where he's just scrolling to scenes and stuff, he would not be doing just settling for local news station on LA. He would be having his own Patreon and doing the straight up grifter stuff because, again,
Yeah.
this guy doesn't care about that. He has no scruples. He just wants something that he can, flourish in and get paid for. So this really is the type of thing that comes out before you fully get established with the kind of grifter gonzo journalism that is just kind of commonplace now.
Yeah.
And everything he does there, from like the shadiness, the questionable ethics, the screwing around with crime scenes, the presenting himself as part of the story with that type of thing, it's that really does speak to like kind of the change in the types of things, because when you watch it, they're presenting it like, oh look, this is kind of disturbing, this is like this. And now I can think of at least like 3 people who are regulars on like Twitter and every type of rage sphere thing who do this on like
Yeah.
daily basis and have made a good living off of it. So that's what I
Yeah.
mean by like it's dated in terms of it feels really fresh when it came out, but then just in the almost immediate backlash with the type of things that happened to journalism and media in the ensuing years, it kind of just changes in a way that I really don't think anybody envisioned when they were making this, as
Sure.
opposed to like a period piece or something that was completely zeitgeisty. So
Right.
that's the dated stuff there.
And so what do you think, Jesse, as a new watcher, how does it feel not dated? How does it feel accurate even now?
Yeah,
or whatever?
I mean, it definitely struck me as like, even though the technology aspect is a little bit off, like even to the point where he's like, "Do you have a phone? Does it have GPS on it?"
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man, we all got that. Yeah. Besides that, I think really just the themes of the media is gonna give the public whatever the public will eat up, and there's only these like unwritten rules keeping big media from just like drumming up as much red meat as possible to throw in our faces. And if that, like, if one person just doesn't care enough, 1 or 2 people, then that's when you just have this like perfect echo chamber that just devolves into madness. So to me, it actually didn't seem dated. It seemed like this is like an allegory. It could have been a modern allegory for like QAnon or for OAN and the rise of those sorts of things.
Yeah. What are you gonna say, Logan?
Yeah, no, when I need to clarify with like I said, with the dated, I just mean like of aspects of it, not the premise of him being unscrupulous and going through all of these things. Because
No,
that's
totally.
just the timeless,
Right.
timeless story of somebody being a piece of shit. So
I do love the idea of like the thought exercise of like, what would this character do now in 2022?
Well,
like,
yeah, and I think the thing that becomes dated about it too, I mean, the fact that anybody watches the news at all is maybe a little dated. Like the modern version of this, some people are pointing out, like Twitter, everybody has a cell phone Everybody has access to social media. This is more like the shooters live streaming from their phone or whatever that
Mhm.
Facebook
Oh, yeah.
picks up in the algorithm and promotes to everybody in the freaking world, even though it's truly horrific shit. It takes them like an hour to say, all right, we won't show an actual snuff film, but did you see the engagement? Wow. And so I think, yeah, like thematically it's accurate, but you're right. Like a dude having to drive real fast with his car to get to a crime scene, to film it, to drive back to sell to somebody. That whole thing is, it's also not very fun to think of. Like, it's just some dude named Jeff who just happens to show up at every crime scene. It's like, oh, sick, or whatever. But like an example that's really close to my life and something that happened only a couple of years later was, so the Charlottesville riots. I live in Charlottesville. I was there.
Excuse me?
I
Excuse
was
us?
rioting. No, I was gonna write an article for Paste, and so they commissioned me to do it. And anyway, obviously the car that hit Heather Heyer, like that was taken from a million angles. Like
Mhm.
people had been filming that because people were filming everything that day. Everybody had a phone. And there's no world in which a stringer, right, like runs down there and gets good footage. Now, granted, it was an extremely public event, and it was in the middle of the freaking day, which is insane.
And
But
like you were saying,
yeah,
a lot of that footage was taken by Gonzo journalists doing it independently for that,
Mm.
which is where he
right.
would be. He would already have been there and just grabbing that and probably causing, like, probably setting things up so that there was an incident where people got into a fight. I mean, it would have been hard, but like he would definitely be
Uh,
portering stuff on
yeah,
that
yeah.
I think he
fire.
probably would have been in like the group chats and the discords or whatever with like the Proud Boys. You know, he would very easily, I think, embed himself. The way
That's
like
interesting.
the
Yeah.
modern, like the most recent Joker had his little Patreon of like 500
Riddler.
little local freaks. Oh, Riddler. Yeah,
Riddler,
Yeah.
like I
the
think
one
that
without
this,
the face paint.
right. I
The
think
duct
that
tape
this,
face.
I think that this guy would have been like, oh, this is easy. I'm just gonna act like I'm a, because I think he's a sociopath and doesn't really take sides on things like that. But I think he would easily pretend that he's like, you know, a white supremacist just so he could get into the group chats.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, he would probably be on both sides, right? Like he would be like pushing the barricades aside so people could get in there, and he would be in both chats where like, or he'd yell gun or something so that all those people with guns would just start shooting.
I don't even think he would be like in the chats and stuff, like as part, like I don't think he would be as visible. Like I think he would just be kind of like prodding things anonymously to kind of get that through there. And then you were bringing up Charlottesville. There's also another striking scene with like modern connection too, because midway through the movie, there's a private plane crash, and it's a race between them and Bill Paxton's character to try to go get footage and everything of like, oh, these survivors from this plane crash, it's horrible, and everyone's talking about it. It's kind of presented as like, oh, they're so gross for going in there. Kobe died like 2 years ago in a helicopter crash, and one of the biggest stories that came out was his wife being absolutely furious that one of the cops on the scene was recording it with his cell phone and trying to show it off in a bar to pick up chicks. So that's what I mean by like, in terms of dated, there's like a dated novelty to like the extremes of viral video and just like the preciousness of like, oh no, this is so disturbing. And then it's like, oh, it's going to get so much worse.
It's like nobody could imagine that like horrific footage could reach the same heights as Keyboard Cat.
Yeah.
When like the big 2014 meme was. And as soon as that dam broke, it was like, well, it's all over.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, talking about it as a period piece or what have you. You know, he came up with this idea in 1988 for this movie. He came up with it well before smartphones, well before
this profession existed since Prohibition, because like the original guy with this was a dude who was in the 30s, and he just grabbed a police scanner and he started doing that, and that's where I think the initial inspiration came from.
Is it a guy named Ouija? Or Ouija or something?
I think it's
I believe so.
Waluigi.
Yeah, it's Waluigi.
Yes,
sure.
Wow.
But yeah, this story was originally written. It was supposed to be like a biography about this one particular photographer from New York, who is I think exactly what you're talking about. That was this whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was the first one to be like, oh, cops go to bad places. People like to look at bad places.
Yeah.
I'll tag along.
And it's interesting too. Again, like some sort of modern analogy for it is less even footage based and more just like the constant rage stories or
Mhm.
whatever. Like the quote unquote Trump bump, where it was like the biggest thing was just trying to share as many crazy sounding stories as possible over and over forever and ever. And actually you can see it now. There's some thing that was running on Twitter that was like, it was revealed that Trump wanted to shoot protesters in the legs or something during the Black Lives Matter thing. And it's like, that's a thing that was leaked when it happened or whatever. Like that came out like 2-3 years ago. But this guy's like, no, but I put it in my book, which you should buy. And it's like always trying to use these, are you
Yeah.
mad because you should read thing.
No, there's a bunch, because I think that's come up a lot during the Trump book era, where you've heard of like access journalism and stuff. And even somebody like Bernstein, no, was it Woodward or Bernstein? One of those two had a book where he was holding stuff back during COVID. And there's been a huge hubbub about like people holding facts back just so that they could publish the book. And people are being outraged with that. And it kind of, like I mentioned, this goes back to him. He would be perfectly in line with like weird, shady ethics in just kind of journalistic outposts.
Yeah.
In modern era. So
And
it's
so,
like,
just to talk about that scene in the movie to tie it back to specifically what is shown. So again, he arrives at a crime scene. It's a triple homicide. He sees the two guys drive away and he gets out. He gets their license plate number. He gets the identity of the men and he finds a way. He just trails them until they're in a very public place and he calls the cops anonymously and then he sets up his cameras. And what ultimately results is, I think it's like 4 deaths, like 8 people wounded.
he calls them up. Yeah, he calls them up and says that it's him so they could set up his alibi later, which is just weird chess move stuff.
Oh, you're right. It's not anonymously. You're right.
Yeah, no. So like 4 cops get shot. Both of the suspects die, and then Riz Ahmed gets shot in the chest like 60 times when he goes to confront it, and it's just a complete clusterfuck, but in the perfect way to establish the story that he's trying to create. And you see it at the end. Not only does he sell this money for not only does he sell all this footage for a bunch of money, but he also gets a $50,000 reward for finding the criminals, which is
right.
Oh, I didn't catch
delightful.
That. That's very funny.
Yeah, Riz asks like, "What's the reward for this?" He's like, $50,000. That's how he gets helps get the vans later on.
2 vans,
so,
yeah.
And that's the thing too. It's it'd be interesting to see Nightcrawler 2, in part because what's he going to stage next? Like the problem with the way that he's doing this is, I mean, I guess he'll continue to exist on just normal crashes and stuff, but it's like at a certain point you have to plan a coup, to overthrow the government. And
this is the dated aspect falling back in, because it presents it, and Gilroy says this when he's talking about writing the screenplay. The ending shot is the 2 vans splitting off directions and going out there, and he tries to present Lou as a virus throughout the movie. So the vans represent going through the veins of the city. Except here's the thing. Within 2 or 3 years, journalism's going to be broken and you're not going to be able to afford like 3 vans or anything like that. So he's buying into like the deadest form of that industry. He would want to be toning that shit down. So
yeah, he like uses the reward money to buy a printing press. Yeah, that's interesting too, because now there's more viruses. He's just the first one, and there's going to be worse variants as soon as other assholes catch on.
Yeah, he's going to spend.
Go ahead, Jordan.
I was just going to say he's going to end up spending most of his time trying to stage accidents to kill every Twitter user that uploads footage like he does. I mean, one of the ways that he ends up being successful is Bill Paxton plays a competing stringer, and he is the one that arrives at the plane crash and all this stuff. So he gets the really high end footage, and so he legitimately, I don't know exactly what he does because I don't know anything about cars, but he does something to his car.
His brakes.
Oh, he cuts his brakes. Well,
yeah,
then he would.
That's what I assume.
He would just back out of the driveway. he would just crash into his trash can.
Well, the backwards
Whatever he
brakes
does.
work.
Yeah. Bill Paxton ends up crashing into a light pole, and then he's there to film. Jake Gyllenhaal's character is there to film him bleeding out, essentially. And so that's one of the ways that he opens up the city for himself. So the whole next movie is just going to have to, he's going to have to kill 90% of Los Angeles populace and film it just to like feed the beast, I suppose. Anyway, sorry, what were you going to say?
It's just GTA is the next movie. He's
Right.
turned the entire city into GTA.
Yeah.
So, yeah, along with like the virus stuff, like you can kind of see him infecting others just throughout the movie, but also like he has a lot of scavenger aspects to him because everything he gets is by kind of just like he originally gets it from Bill Pullman. He's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And he just kind of follows him back to his van and gets the info little by little, just piecemealed in like the way like you would never rethink of this conversation ever again because it's just like, "Oh yeah, we just got this, blah blah, I'm out of here." And that just cultivates his entire business plan. Then later on, he's following that other journalist the entire way to his car, and then that guy realizes and yells at him. But during that time, he realizes how to sell video to that. So you keep seeing him have these little like scavenger, like coyote moments, or like just doing that. And gradually, he just builds his way up into a bigger virus, and he just starts infecting everything around him. And it's just funny to me, like I said, that this is in an industry that's really going to change and probably die off. So I don't think that they knew that that was going to happen when they were filming it. So I thought that I thought that the ending was supposed to be more hard hitting than they were going to establish. And it kind of goes, it's like, oh yeah, he's going to run out of money to pay for that crew in like 6 months because Facebook is just going to destroy you.
Yeah,
so
the ending was basically just like, and now he's the king of this very stable environment.
Yeah. Like the ending of it, now he would be filming videos like, my day driving on the 405 was so horrible. And then it's just a car flipping over 7 times on TikTok. And that's it. Like,
yeah. With the track behind it of somebody wheeze laughing for whatever reason, that's on all the good TikToks. But I think also, because he's a handsome guy and he's charming as hell, and he specifically made a point to meet everybody in the studio, I think probably what he's doing, he's probably an anchor somewhere now at what's that huge like evil conglomerate that owns like 80% of all local news channels now?
Oh, Sinclair,
yeah. He would definitely be like a big Sinclair broadcaster guy, or he'd be an executive or something.
Yeah.
I think
he has that vibe.
And on the scavenger thing, so that is something that they expressly said, that he's kind of like a coyote, he's a scavenger. And as we already mentioned, the very first scene is him stealing a chain link fence to go sell to a business site. Like he literally is just scavenging for raw materials to sell. And actually he ends up asking the guy, the construction head, I don't know anything
Manny
about that
from
either.
Scarface.
Yeah. Like, can I get a job? Can I do an internship? And he's like, we're not going to hire a thief.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, well then I'll find a job where that's okay.
No, he says like excellent point. Like, yeah. And it's like,
he was kind of like, nice. Gotcha.
Yeah. Well, because and the other thing is that Jake Gyllenhaal of his own volition lost 30 pounds for this movie. And nobody asked him to do it. And a lot of the people were like, I don't know. We didn't really hire you to be Yaki necessarily.
I think it works. He looks
totally.
just so
hungry,
not sleazy. He just looks starving and ravenous.
Right.
Like it's just, he's got the big creepy Jake energy, which is the best Jake Gyllenhaal energy is Jake Gyllenhaal.
He's got those big crazy eyes anyway, so the less face he has, the bigger and crazier they get. I was just thinking of other examples of him doing that recently. There was Oakjaw where he did all that crazy stuff. He's been nuts in a lot of movies, but I think my favorite one is, have you seen John Mulaney's Sack Lunch Bunch? Yeah, where he plays Mr. Music. It's Mr. Music. Oh my gosh. That's like my favorite thing in the world, is him just like, you can make music out of anything. And he couldn't get it to work. And so he just gets angrier and angrier. That's the sequel to Nightcrawler. That's how he tries to get his content now. because he can't string anymore. He's got to be the music man on the internet, on TikTok or whatever.
It's very much the Robert Pattinson energy of like they just look handsome and stuff, but man, they're so much better when they're just like 10 pounds down and you can see their eyes bugging and they look like they're gonna like stab you at any given. Like, imagine if you're that security guard. What's more terrifying than like a sweaty, like serpent looking Jake Gyllenhaal just striking at you in the middle of the night? Like, and he stole your watch. Like, how do you go on after that? Like, you are definitely having PTSD there.
Yeah, is that dude
Is he
dead?
not dead? Yeah.
I think he's dead.
I thought he killed him.
Questionable, because we don't
then-
actually see him we don't see him actually kill anyone. He'll set people up to get murdered,
Yeah, that's
but
true.
they never really establish most of his crimes. Honestly, aren't established. Even the disturbing sex pest thing that not sex pest, just blackmailing into sex that's implied with Rene Russo. You never see them make physical contact beyond just like an initial handshake. So
Right.
I think that a lot of that is just kind of fill the blanks things there. I wouldn't be surprised either way, but I think you would have heard more like of a story of like if a security guard had been murdered or something.
Well,
like,
right.
That just seems like
Sure.
something that was
That
said.
I was expecting to hear more the whole time. And actually the whole movie, this is a running theme where I sometimes think I'm watching a completely different movie than I actually am. I thought this movie was about him becoming like a serial killer so that he could be the first on the scene to film these things.
Yeah, no, he's just he's just a monster from the beginning and he remains a monster and he's honest to himself the entire time. Like that's one of the greatest parts of the Riz Ahmed conversation later on is when he's like, you don't understand people. You don't get like that they have feelings and all of this. And then he just drops the bomb. He's like, did you ever think that I understand people and I just don't like them? And that kind of just establishes everything about the character. Because like you were saying, the whole time you're thinking like, oh, does he just not understand things? Is he socially awkward? It's like, no, he just doesn't care about dealing with humanity.
That was so chilling, that moment, because when his assistant like said that, he's like, this is the problem. You don't treat people like they're humans. I was like, yeah, I get that. I know people like that. And then he quickly turns around and he's like, if you want me to treat you like a human, I just want you to know that means I'm probably going to kill you because I hate humans.
Yeah.
So
like that's
terrifying.
The moment you get out of the car immediately. That's just bad situational awareness. But I mean, they kind of imply that Riz Ahmed has some issues in terms of like drugs and possibly homelessness and things that kind of have him in this manipulative relationship with Jake. And the one time he sticks up for himself, he gets shot 5 times in the chest.
Yeah.
Well, there's also the first time he meets him, he does this thing throughout the movie. He calls himself Lou to everybody to kind of endear himself and make him nickname. And the first time that Riz tries to say Lou, he corrects him and tells him Lewis to kind of put him at like a I'm your boss establishing thing. So there's a lot of mental manipulation going on there. And it's just because he literally doesn't really give a shit about human beings. He doesn't care.
Well, and I think so about the Riz thing, he did apparently visit some homeless shelters and stuff to try and get a sense of that desperation that you might have. And that like, why would you continue to work this job for $30 a night, which is awful. But that's part of it, right? It's something and it's going somewhere. It's steady and whatever. But also I was gonna say, I feel like that's the other half of this, right? Is it's sort of a broad metaphor. I would say Jake in some ways, his character, Lou, is just sort of like unfettered capitalism at its worst, you know, like the really bad version of it where it doesn't care about humans. It's just whatever sells regardless of whether it's good or bad for society. And just, you know, the whole time. And I think this is where, you know, it's Jake Gyllenhaal claims that he and the director were laughing while they filmed this, like the whole time. They thought it was really funny. And I think a lot of it comes from he's essentially like a walking business class. He's always giving business tips. He's always saying like leadership advice, essentially, like, here's how you make your way in the workplace, the modern workplace. Here's what you got to do, kid. And it's like not inaccurate most of the time. It's just that the way that he applies it feels so awful. But I think the point is to say, hey, these are this is like the true end result of these ideals or whatever.
Well,
Like, if
you
you're
see
actually
it
going to follow this,
you see it with
you're not
his
great.
dealings with everyone because he has no compromise.
Right.
Like, and he point blank says that every single time, because what he deals with is a variety of people who are in desperate situations. Riz Ahmed is desperate. He's living in a garage. He wants that. So he deals with them and he offers him the absolute minimum, and that's it. Meanwhile, he has Renee Russo. She's very desperate to keep her job. He points out point blank, this is what's happening. This is how much I can get you. You're on your contract. And he just has no bend or break there. Later on, Bill Paxton comes up to him, offers him complete 50-50 split out of the desperation that he doesn't want to lose this type of deal with him. And then he just says, I don't care. I can't tell you how. Let me put this in the most point blank things. I do not want to do this idea. And he just never compromises on that at any point when he's given that opportunity, because again, he doesn't care about people. He just cares about what he wants. He's a shark for the most part. So
yeah,
gotta eat.
Yeah. And then I also thought it was possibly going to be a turning point after he turns Bill Paxton down in the most like the most stark way possible. And then Bill Paxton immediately comes back and he gets the better of him. Like, he gets the jump on a huge story. And I don't know, I didn't actually think that this character in this movie was going to have some sort of compromise to him, but it did surprise me how he got back up on top, which was to sabotage this guy and eventually be the one in his face with a camera as he's getting loaded into the ambulance.
Right, because that's the thing, right? It's not about being the best per se. He does seem to have some skill. He can do
It's
whatever.
literally the last line of the movie. I wouldn't have you do anything that I wouldn't do. Like, he flat out tells his new crew that. That's the core of it.
And the secret to him getting ahead is truly less about his ability, like the time that he spent working on his craft or whatever, and only about his unwillingness to compromise, to go as far as he physically can. And that's part of the thing, right? So, David Williamson keeps pointing out there's some Donald Trump comparisons. Yeah. It's a little bit of that thing, right, where Trump has said things to the effect of, people are like, well, you should release your tax returns. You didn't pay your taxes. He's like, no, I just exploited loopholes. And people are like, oh, that is cool. Good job. And it's like, yeah, I guess.
Difference thing with Trump and him is that Lou is completely aware. And that's the problem, is that like you think that he's kind of a little oblivious in certain parts, and maybe he's just like, oh, he's getting caught up. But then he says, no, I'm aware of this. I just don't like people. So there's a difference there where it's just like the shock of, oh, this guy just is a monster. Like, you think he's a monster, but then you see the levels are just, there's even more below there of how dark and how deep he can get there. Or go ahead, Jesse.
I was just going to say that before we get too far off of these, like the existing billionaire, millionaire megalomaniacs, this guy is different from like the Donald Trumps or like the Elon Musks. I feel like that's going to start a storm in the comments, but they came from money, and the fact that they're so singularly focused and on only accepting what they want is because that's what they've gotten their whole lives, because they're rich as hell. This guy comes from, as far as we know, he comes from trying to sell 3 feet of chain link fence for $15, Right. So he develops any skill that's necessary. He goes out and scavenges these skills like a little raccoon to become successful.
Which is, again, not to make everything about capitalism, but that is like what people are told to do, right? Yeah. If you're not successful, then like just get good at something and do it, and you'll make money and it'll be great. It's just that sometimes the most effective way to do that might be to stage a crime or something.
It's not even, the main difference there is that he's not driven by ego. It's driven entirely by ambition. And you kind of get that also from, he purposefully sets it up when he starts negotiating terms. He doesn't say like, oh, this was brought to us by Lou, who got us this thing. He tells them, the news anchors, to say, this is by, what is it, like
Video Production Services,
Video Production Studios, a professional news agency, because he doesn't care about the egotist part. He just wants his ambitions to be fulfilled. So there's a difference there where, like, a lot of times with like rich and billionaire stuff, you're kind of getting the, oh, I want my name and spotlight and that type of thing. He just wants unfettered success, and he doesn't really care if his name's there. He just wants to have the money. He wants to have that. He even talks with Rene Russo because he could be using this to kind of like manipulate an intern to sleeping with him and stuff. But he's like, my work and that thing, I don't like those. But that makes it weird to have relationships, especially the physical part. So even with that, he literally just wants a physical relationship out of there. So it's not so much ego, it's just the base nature of filling his animalistic needs. And that's kind of the separation with like, say, a Musk or like a Trump, where there's a lot of ego involved there. It's kind of scarier. So
yeah.
Right. Cool. So one of the only other things I wanted to mention was, so this movie was nominated for Best Original Screenplay. It's one of these indie movies that they made on an $8.5 million budget, which sounds like a lot, but it's not. And they filmed in like 80 locations. They had to film at night. They said they almost ran out of time. They took it as like a personal challenge to actually get the movie made and all this stuff. And when they aired like an unfinished version at Cannes, it's French, at the film festival, and Cannes. And they had a bidding war and all this stuff, and it ended up making $50-something million. So it's kind of one of these, I don't know, prototypical indie movie successes that they made on a low budget, kind of like, I don't know, a Get Out or any sort of A24 stuff that does well. And I just think it's really interesting that people watch this movie. I mean, I think it's really good. I think, the cinematography is awesome. The story is really compelling. Jake Gyllenhaal is awesome. The reason that people watched it in a lot of ways, I don't know if you guys read into any of this, they did a like crazy viral marketing strategy where they like created resumes for him and like released a bunch of crazy clips and stuff like that. It's amazing. It's surprising to me that we don't do that more with movies still. It just feels like every time you hear about like a Blair Witch Project or something, or a Cloverfield, it's always like, oh, we had a really interesting marketing strategy, as opposed to, for example, the Northman is going to lose a ton of money probably. And because people are not going to watch $200 million worth of this Viking man killing people. And it's like, should they have done something? Should they have staged a Viking attack? I don't know what you do, but
I was curious when I read that they did these like Craigslist things and like, these video reels. Did they work, or was it just something that like a marketing agency was like, we got a great idea? Have you ever heard of Craigslist?
Yeah,
I don't know.
This really felt more this was a heavy industry type buzz thing. Like it's legitimately surprising that Jake did not get a Academy Award nomination, because he was nominated for like every single acting award. And I forget where I read this, but it was like he hit all of the points that you would want to hit during nomination season for various awards from like critics and things. And he's one of like only, I think, 8 actors who hit those bench points and was not nominated for an Academy Award, which is even weirder considering that the script was nominated for. I mean, it's a great script, don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, you feel like he would have had that type of love there. I kind of wish I had checked up which actors got nominated that year, but
yeah. You're right. I think a lot of the power of this movie was having Jake Gyllenhaal on board, and he was like a big part of, like, he took on a lot of the production of it. Like he even like he hired a lot of the crew. He was just really hands on. So I think it was the fact that this was his baby that people are like, all right, we'll give it a shot.
Also, this was during the dawning era of neo noir or neon noir. So like, this was around the era of like Drive starting to get mainstream buzz, and like other Nicholas Winding Refn movies and that. And it's kind of like a predecessor to that type of thing that we see a lot in modern days. So it's kind of had this fresh feel compared to a lot of other films that probably would have taken a different angle in terms of like direction. So there's a lot of interesting stuff there. I will say this, this has nothing to do with anything, but you were talking about like all the skills he learned. Has anyone learned how to edit video quicker in human history than Jake Gyllenhaal did? Because it's like he sells that first video and he has no idea. Then he takes like 2 hours on Google and suddenly he's doing like J cuts and like just all this
Yeah.
stuff in there. It's just amazing. Like, yeah,
I'd love
that's
to
not how that works.
I'd love to see a cut of like this brutal murder footage, but with like star wipes and
Because he has no idea. He's like making
Yeah.
an iMovie. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Page peels.
and like
Um,
little like jingly like ukulele background music.
Yeah, no. So I mean, that like I said, if he did it in modern times, he probably would have had that stuff and been like the biggest TikTok person. Like he would be doing videos with Jake Paul by now.
It is, yeah, it is amazing that any of his footage, and like any of these guys' footage, is ever usable. He does get surprisingly, I think, accurate when he gets the big camera of
Mhm.
like holding it by the handle, keeping it steady.
Yeah.
But definitely at the beginning where he's got that freaking handheld, I'm like, this isn't
It's
usable.
also this movie takes place in an alternate universe where the LAPD is very tolerant about being recorded at all times.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
that is
Yeah. The only time they're ever upset is if he's potentially harming the victim or their family.
yeah, if he
They're not
was
worried
as
about
proud as
themselves,
me,
man.
he would have been taking a baton to the face within like 5 seconds of arriving
Yeah.
in a crime scene with a camera in their face.
And
So
also, I am so I don't know anything as we're establishing on this particular podcast, but like, are you allowed to chase a cop car chasing a car?
Who's
I
gonna
don't
stop
know.
you? The cops?
That can't
No.
possibly.
that's
like,
I've seen people try to do that to get through a red light before because
yeah.
I've just seen scummy people. But like, yeah, there is a lot of just hand waving to the numerous things that he would have gotten arrested for in terms of that and like other things. But you know,
Cops will
some
let
movie.
cops will let an Amber Alert go if you try and follow them through a red light. They're gonna stop and they're gonna get you.
It's
I mean, I didn't
he's-
expect him to turn around.
when did he take stunt driving lessons? Because he's
Dude,
just
right?
dude
He
is
is really
great
good.
on the wheel. That is some Toretto level, just like avoiding an accident.
Right.
Well, what do you think his previous career was? Because we're catching him right at the beginning of a new career that he picks up within days. So what do you think? Like before this, maybe he was like a bike messenger.
This
Oh my
goes
God.
back to the this kind of goes back to the neon noir thing, like with Driver and stuff. He's just ethereal. He just appears and that's it. And they kind of
Right.
they
That's
said
cool.
that they purposely set that up as a point when creating the character because they didn't want to establish some trauma or anything like that. He's just he was a monster probably when he was a kid or had some weird things with that, and he just became a weirdo as an adult and just he's probably been going from scheme to scheme, and this is the one that finally, you know, he found
Really
what he was
clicked.
good at, being a scumbag.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
That's like me and making dick joke videos.
yeah,
Just,
this movie's perfectly cast, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Like I can't think of one aspect of this movie where I would like even somebody like Kevin Rom, who Kevin Rom's from Mad Men. He plays Rene Russo's not superior, but like her editor over at the news thing. Like
Oh yeah, yeah.
even like bit roles like that, they just perfectly nail like who they need in that. Like I can't think of one like part of the film where it's like this person didn't bring their A game. Just So
Yeah.
just want to give a shout out to that.
Yeah. No, I think all the way through it's a really good movie. It is interesting that it's like, oh, you probably should have gone 10 times harder with the future in mind, recognizing that
Mhm.
this becomes pretty rote at a certain point. Cool. Any other thoughts, or we want to throw it to the unwashed masses and see what they think?
Yeah. Let's give him time to wash up. Sorry, go ahead.
I wanted to, this movie has weird sports movie vibes. I kind of mentioned that earlier. Yeah. So when you watch this movie, it opens with like establishing shots of just like where the field of play is going to be all over LA. And it also has this like kind of explosions in the sky guitar rhythm going on there.
Right.
So following that, you get him kind of having like a mentor who introduces him to his new job / sport, which is going to be journalism, Bill Paxton, but it's done in the way that's just completely not traditional in a sports movie. So he just doesn't really like him. He doesn't even give him any guidance. And then later on, you know, usually you'll have like Mick have a heart attack in the middle of a Rocky fight or somebody
Right.
gets that. He cuts the brakes on his car and lets him crash headfirst into a light pole. So that's his thing there. You get montages of him getting gradually better at his job to the point where he gets that souped up Charger and he's actually doing all of this stuff there. So he's starting to get to his high point. He has the love interest who's kind of more into the industry and kind of usually that would be kind of like she brought the best out of me. Instead, he's just forcing her into a weird sexual contract, which at the end she kind of seems not into, but she seems to have a respect for him on some level, because you see him start to stand up for him for no reason when he's not even in a room.
Yeah, that part is very similar to The Blind Side for me.
Yes.
Sandra Bullock and her
Michael
adopted
O'Hare.
son. Yeah. Their relationship was pretty hot too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So you get all of that, and then it ends with just him being at the top of his game and just, taking over his industry and stuff. So I can see why Jake and it's Dan Gilroy. It's not the other one. Yeah, because
there's a bunch of Gilroys.
Yeah, Dan Gilroy's brother did the Bourne Identity movies and the Bourne Supremacy. So yeah, but you can see why Gilroy and Jake were like kind of laughing in this, because if you look at it from a certain perspective, it's a very like uplifting movie about a man reaching his goals and accomplishments. And just like, you just have to overlook every single terrible aspect that he did to get there. So it's kind of like inspirational Citizen Kane, I guess.
Yeah, they said, people don't make enough, or not enough. No, people don't tend to make anti-hero movies where the bad guy wins outright. And it's just like, yay. And they intentionally did stuff with the score. Like when he is moving that dead body at that accident, the score under it is kind of triumphant. Like, oh, this is going to be a great moment for him.
He figured it out.
Yeah. And you're like, this is a crime.
Even the final chase has the same patterns and rhythms to like the final game in a movie. Like you even have that like defining moment of the crash that's almost exactly like a home run slam or anything like that. He just like, he takes that victory lap and it's just like, we did it. Yeah. And it's just,
and it's very much his attitude every time he like comes up with a big win is like, I knew I could do it. Like he's not celebrating, he's not surprised. He's just like, it's still business as usual.
Yeah, it's just the fist pump and then going on to we had a good crime that we set up, but we're gonna look at the game plan, we're gonna look back at film. We're gonna go back to the house because you can't get rested on your laurels. We got another murder that we got next week that we got to set up there. Just one video at a time. Coach has really kept us in the game. So it's like, it's kind of a weird thing. Oh, one thing I noticed, he spends he spends so much time learning police codes where he's like listening to there. It's like, bro, you could just Google that. Like even then you could have Googled that. You're just, that was not like hard. Yeah, that was a very easy to do task there, but
Yeah.
I feel like he's an Ask Jeeves guy. He sticks with the classics.
He did use search.com or whatever in the movie because
he use like a fake search engine?
Yeah. Which is something they always do. Actually, there's I want to do Your Brain Uncracked about horror tropes. And one of my favorite ones is that most modern horror movies, they try and Google what the problem is. They're like freaky girl in my bathroom, but it's always on like searchblast.edu.
The only exception for that is if it's made by Columbia or Sony Pictures, because then they'll awkwardly throw in Bing, and you're like, okay, come on now. Like in the Amazing Spider-Man movies, he's using Bing for everything, and it's like, okay, come on. No,
I love that.
That's not happening.
You gotta Bing it, bro. How are you?
They had that. We have a video of that. We made fun of that for, I think it was Hawaii 5-0, where there's literally a scene that's complete product placement where the guy tells the woman just, Bing it. She's like, what? Bing it. And then they show her phone and she's literally typing it into Bing, and it's just the most awkward transition. But
that's amazing.
Yeah, that's what you get when you don't use Google and you're owned by Sony. So yeah.
That's fantastic. All right, Unwashed Masses. Let's see what you got for us. This is the movie where Jake Gyllenhaal lost too much weight and he hasn't looked the same since. Fine.
That's not true, because he gained that stuff back for when he did the boxing movie. Although that might have been after this. Was that before or after this?
Jake Gyllenhaal boxing.
Yeah.
That is 2015. Yeah, that was like the next year. Southpaw.
Yeah, so he gained all of that and more back. He got swole. So
his face didn't get swole enough for this guy. Parallax, but with a bunch of force, says that Jake Gyllenhaal is criminally underrated. I don't know if he's criminally underrated. I think a lot of people like him, but yeah, he could be in more stuff, I guess. Bryn Kelly points out that he is very different from this than he was in the Sack Lunch Bunch. Okay. Austin Snyder on Facebook said, I'm really surprised this movie hasn't had a resurgence on Netflix, given that it's like what we've been saying, the people yelling about fake news all the time. And that's, the fake news moment in particular is the whole main crime happens in some really nice suburban home, which is really exciting because when rich white people die, they're able to say, oh my God, the crime is on your doorstep. Other rich white people who watch TV, who watch cable news. And they learn kind of before they hit the air. It's like, oh, it's like a drug thing. They had like crack in there or something. And she's like, we'll talk about that later. We're going to stick to the sexy white people getting killed just for being nice, rich people, as opposed to them being actual drug dealers. And so anyway,
I'm not surprised that it hasn't had that big of a resurgence, because this also suffers from, like, I'm gonna compare it to Drive because it's probably its most contemporary thing. But with Drive, when the marketing for that came out, like, people were upset that there weren't more car scenes in there, like a Fast and Furious film. And I think that this suffers, not in a bad way, but just in terms of expectations. They go to very dark places, and there's no moment of catharsis where he gets his comeuppance. It's a very kind of like bleak and like that type of thing. And that generally is not going to be popping up as much for, like, resurgence things outside of like this was overlooked. Let's go, on like a podcast like this, we're like, oh, let's see how this aged or something like there. This is definitely one of the gems in his acting reel, but like, I think more people have probably seen that meme of him being like, oh, it must be Friday, with the tie that people put on like Twitter responses, than have actually seen this movie.
It did get like a B- from audience polls. Like, they liked it fine, but it's not one. And I'll admit, when Anna and I saw it in theaters, we walked out and we're like, I thought it was gonna be a thriller. I thought this was gonna be like,
when are they gonna make Avatar 2?
That's exactly what we say. We say that after every movie. We're just like, why is this not Avatar 2? I went in expecting it to be, but it was.
What if the movie had ended with him revealing that he was a Na'vi, and that was like his highest growth?
I don't think I would like it.
Yes. So I just want to say quickly, a reason why I'm not surprised that this hasn't had a resurgence is that, people love to bemoan fake news, but one of the main points of this movie is that the audience is complicit in that whole ecosystem, and people don't really want to grapple with that. People just want to say, oh, big media is feeding me garbage. But like, they're feeding it to you because you want to eat that up all day long.
Right. Yeah. That's a good point. Stephen Guy says it should be disturbing, but I don't know what that was in reference to. But he does say, Stephen Guy says, cell phones have ruined so many movie plots. That should be a cracked article. It probably has been. We could do it again sometime. But, we've probably done it 100 times, but it's still true. Cell phones, they ruined our favorite films.
Even movies with cell phones, because they have cell phones and they're using them. It's just the technology is literally, he could do everything he does with like a decent iPhone and kind of one of those like lens packages you get online, and just do all of the work that he's doing instead of investing in those cameras later on.
Yeah.
David Williamson says, we don't need a Nightcrawler anymore. I was present for a shooting a while ago and people didn't run. They took out their phones, which.
Yeah. And see, like, even if first off, I'm glad that you're okay, but like, you see this pop up numerous times during tragedies and stuff. Like you mentioned the Charlottesville angles and all of that there. So that's what I'm talking about by just like, it's the themes in the movie don't age poorly, but just the setting of it is just incredibly strange. And I don't think anyone foresaw that. So yeah.
Stephen Guy also says, this is back to the Kobe thing. Imagine being Imagine being so impressed with grisly cell phone footage that you let a guy bone you, which is a good point. It's hard to imagine that being a great pickup line. The cop who had the
Yeah,
helicopter.
for the record, I believe that it did not work, thankfully, and then I believe that Vanessa Bryant, got that footage back and maybe got that cop fired. She has been very adamant because, you know, that's her husband and daughter who died in there about just the gross way that people were handling footage with that stuff, and there's some really gross details in there. So it just kind of struck me as, again, a weird thing with that helicopter or with the private plane thing. Just
Yeah,
ugh.
right. Bella Lugosi says that Stephen King had a TV movie in the 90s called Night Flyer about a paparazzi who altered scenes to get better pictures. It's a terrible movie, but the vampire stuff is allegorical. So I guess it is Stephen King. There are vampires. So I guess you can watch that. Stephen Guy again says you should make Nightcrawler into a Twitch live streamer. I think Facebook Live works well enough. Fade Dragon Tear says Gyllenhaal is pretty unhinged in Ambulance, and saying Gyllenhaal's the best. Gyllenhaal. I haven't seen that. I really wanted to, but it went out of theaters really, really fast. So that probably would have been similar. He's now in the ambulance being chased. Wow, that's the sequel.
Another Jake Gyllenhaal job for this Jake. He has a lot of business ideas and a lot of that. He could easily be, what's that guy? Ty? With it, like, oh, here's my shelf of books that I read for all of this information.
Oh, yeah.
He could 100% be an entrepreneur, grifting guy talking about side hustles, and that would probably more likely be his, because he doesn't really have the passion for journalism outside of it making him money. So he would probably be more of like the entrepreneur grifter on like Instagram and Twitter in the modern era, which is even more terrifying.
Yeah. Cool. I think that's all the main ones. Let's hop over to alternate titles. Jesse, you got any for us?
Yeah, I got a couple for us. All right, what do we got here? The Pursuit of Horniness. The 2 to the 101 to the 110 to the 10, which is something they made sure to say because they wanted to really drive it home that we're in LA and we're driving. I thought
what is it? 2 to the 101 to the 2 to the 10 or something?
2 to the 101 to the 110 to the 10.
If you give me directions like that, I'm just stopping the car and I'll be like, no, what? No.
Yeah, it'd be funny if that was that his partner's breaking point where he's like, you have to talk to me like a human.
Yeah.
That's how humans talk in LA, dude, which is where we are, by the way.
What else you got, bruh?
Okay, Sabotage on the 101.
Ooh.
That's sabotage, exclamation point.
Yeah.
As you know. Okay, last one. Jill and Gary, Jill and Ross.
I can never spell any of these stupid titles, you. Jill and Gary, Jill and Ross.
Yeah.
Stupid.
We should have a vote on these because I have a feeling chat's on my side.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Checking the chat.
No, I am a fan of Gyllenhaal, Jill and Ross. That is. Oof.
Okay. What do you got, Logan?
Eddie Brock Origins. This is if I was doing the Joker for Eddie Brock, where it's just like without Spider-Man and just completely in the real world. This is the movie that I would make. And I would have him get Peter Parker shot 5 times in the chest because that's what happened to Peter after Uncle Ben died. He just went on rough times. So yeah, you can easily see this as a Eddie Brock movie.
Excellent.
So, that's great.
That'd be one of them. Crash. That'd just be my other. Because, you know, every like 10 years or so, we have an LA movie where it's just called Crash and it involves this type of crap. So, yeah, Crash.
Yeah, we're due. We're due for another.
I kind of just want to steal what's the title for Nick Cage's new movie? It's
The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent.
Yes. That's that right there. That would be my exact title, and I would just have a picture of Jake Gyllenhaal just
Maybe it should be The Unbearable Lack of Weight for Massive Talent because he lost a lot of he's skinny now.
yeah.
The Unbearable Lack of Weight for for massive talent, for massive eyeballs. We're gonna do that one next week, by the way. Spoiler alert, and it is a delightful film. I very much enjoyed it. I had Coyote Boy. Trying to think of how to work Bubble Boy into there. Coyote Bubble Boy, Coyote Boy, Bulbous Eye Boy. You know, some sort of boy. Jake Gyllenhaal is very boyish. And then I just had like Stringers, and I really like Neon Noir because I'd never heard that before, but that's cool. I like it a
Yeah,
lot.
it's a term.
Yeah.
Another one you could call it is Nightcrawler, parentheses, not the X-Men movie, parentheses.
Okay,
There,
so
and
actually,
parentheses.
this is a good
Yeah.
this is a good transition into what people suggested. John Evans says Nightcrawler. No, not that one.
Yeah.
Could be a good one. Bren Kelly says, "Why are you watching?" Ooh, this works on
I
so
like
many
that.
layers.
I missed it.
So why are you watching? Like, you shouldn't be watching people dying and crashing.
Oh, I
and
see.
stuff.
Okay.
I will say that if this did have Nightcrawler from X-Men, that's who Jake was playing, it would be incredible because he'd just be teleporting into crime scenes like a little creep and just, yeah.
Or the much better film, Jumper.
Jumper. Yeah.
With, what's his freaking name?
Hayden Christensen.
Hayden Christensen, where he just jumps everywhere.
What a classic Hayden Christensen, Samuel Jackson movie that nobody remembers.
That tried to set up the universe of the Paladins and the Jumpers have been fighting for millennia. It's a real. We should watch that.
As soon as you start telling me that your conflict's been going on for a while, I just start like glazing eyes.
Yeah, I don't care that you guys have been fighting for more than right now. We're only going to watch right now, hopefully.
Millennia ago.
Well, it's so that they could be like, I can't wait for Jumper Origins, as to your point, where it's like the third Underworld movie. I'm watching all the Underworlds right now, and it's like inexplicably set in like 9th century after 2 straight Matrix ripoffs, and you're like, wow, well, that's why you build lore into your movie in case you have a Lord of the Rings set lying around you don't know what to do with. You're just like, and now we're back here when Hayden Christensen's great grandfather was a child. Anyway,
but if you don't establish that type of stuff, then we'll lose great scenes like Harriet Tubman being in a Transformers movie, which is a thing that happened.
Did that happen?
In the one where Mark Wahlberg turns into a cybernetic knight or whatever, they show the history of Transformers helping history. And
was she
there's
driving?
a photo of a Transformer with the Underground Railroad, bud.
Oh, man.
Oh, Harriet Tubman. I was thinking of, what's the Helen Keller?
Harriet the Spy?
Oh, God. Oh, like, Optimus Prime saying WATER. It has a name. Like,
well, I thought it's like, yeah. She like crashed Megatron into a pole because she's not allowed to drive. Okay.
Language. Yes.
So Irish Lover 7745 says Brokeback Mountain 2, the Cleveland Steamer. Well, what is the Cleveland Steamer part? Those are just words that you put together.
Yeah, I don't feel like there's anything implying deuce dropping in there. Yeah.
That's unfair. We're gonna skip that. This movie is basically a better Donnie Darko sequel. That's probably true. I never saw. Is it Southland Tales or whatever? I don't think that's actually
not a good movie.
It's not a Donnie Darko sequel, but it's the same guy.
Weird.
Jake Gyllenhaal always has to solve a mystery. Oh, these are not titles. I'm out of order. Eliminating Morals is Bryn Kelly's alternate. And then somebody followed that up immediately with Eliminating Mortals. Little back and forth here. Ambulance Chaser. Ambulance.
Oh, I like that.
Chaser. Yeah, it's really good. It's really good. Good job, David Williamson. That's the best one ever. Success Story by Bryn Kelly. That's fine. Boogie Nights 2, The Return of the Diggler. Okay. Do we get any other ones? Yeah, Ambulance. Yeah, we already got that one, Brian. Why did you send that to me? Let me see if any of these other ones popped up here. Boy at the Spruce. Banff. I don't even know what I'm looking at right now. Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Is the sound Nightcrawler makes when he teleports. So that's where Banff is from. Nice one there. Whoever said that. Good deep.
This is not a title. This was a riff somebody was trying, but Ruth Bader Ginsburg mo-capped Bumblebee. I think maybe not for this movie, but should be the title of some movie.
Uh-huh.
I believe they
Almost
did it at some point.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Jake Gyllenhaal.
Bumblebee.
Oh,
Yeah.
Bumblebee and Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was on a BuzzFeed list of like weird couples you didn't know. So yeah.
That's in one of the history scenes.
Yeah.
It's like she was getting what is the term? Whatever. Justified. What does the Senate do? Confirmed.
And Bumblebee's in the background.
Bumblebee's
just
in the
like
back.
I've always supported this.
Yeah. Anyway, what a horrible way to end this. So we're going to wrap this up now. So we are still continuing to live stream every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Next week is The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, which is the Nick Cage movie where he plays Nick Cage as Nick Cage. And it is truly a delightful little film. Theoretically, Allie will be back, but at this point, who knows? And you can subscribe to the Crack Movie Club on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You know, we do it on Facebook and Twitter now, so you can follow us there. We're also a newsletter. You can sign up for us at crack.com/movie club. Logan, thanks for joining us. It was great.
Thank you for having
Thank
me.
you, Logan.
It was fun to rewatch. So,
yeah. Where can we find you if we wanted to peruse your catalog or learn?
Like, what's your
at
address?
The Logan Trent. Oh yeah. At the Logan Trent on Twitter and Instagram is where I am. Check out the movie stuff that we're doing on Cracked. We got a bunch of, and everything else that we do on Cracked because we got a bunch of great articles coming out. So yeah. Zanadi has a new series called Inside the Slasher Studio, which the first article dropped yesterday where we're interviewing Norman Bates. So yeah, check that out.
Is that like a serial killer reviews serial killer movies kind of vibe? Or
it is inside the actor studio, but interviewing Norman Bates and dropping a lot of knowledge of like just actual production for Psycho.
Oh, cool.
Stuff. So you'll get informed too. So yeah.
And
then next week we're doing Billy the Puppet from Saw. So look forward to that.
That's very close to my heart. If you have not seen me talk about all the Saw movies for an hour and 15 minutes, just look up Saw.
That was the best idea I ever had, was making you watch them. And yeah, I can't every single time.
I know. I do enjoy it. That's why Underworld is next. You heard it here first. Jesse, where can we find you?
Yeah, man. Cash me on Twitter at Eisemann. Eisemann.
Excellent. And you can find me at the _J_breeding, which is like Logan's handle, but much more complicated. That's it, I think. So I think we just say bye now, and then I'll hit the button. So
remember, I would never ask either of you to do something that I wouldn't do myself.
Logan's asked me to do some fucked up stuff.
But he also was doing it and to me, so it was fine.
Very complicit.
All right. Let's wave goodbye until I hit the end of the podcast button, because I'm a little worried that we're a little bit behind. So bye.
Goodbye.
Hit the button soon, and here it comes, the button.